So some stuff. Okay, here we go. I think we're live. Hello, everybody. Thanks, lady. We are here, and this is Extra Connections Race Talk live here on JLJ Media. It's been a long time, but your little mini series is back, and we're ready to tackle those topics that everyone's talking about in some form or another. I'm James Lott Jr., of course, one of your co-hosts for this show. I'm here with my buddy, author of The White Guy Confronting Racism, an Invitation to Reflect and Act, my friend Jared Karol. Hi, Jared.
Hi, James. Good to see you again.
I know it's been months.
It has.
He was taking care of family stuff, traveling, taking time off, whatever. I took time off, as you guys know, for a few months to recalibrate, which I really do think it's a great idea. We're just talking about consuming things differently before the show and stuff. It's a great way to kind of stop, drop, and roll, isn't it?
I'm well. Jealousy has I think is too strong. I'm envious, or I'm living vicariously through your multi-month time off because I need that because the recalibration is definitely due for me. But unfortunately, it's nowhere in sight with that type of break. But it's someday
you can aspire to it. I didn't have any breaks for the first 20 years of my life. So I mean, 20 years of my adult life. But then the kids got grown. I got breaks after that.
There you go.
You're raising kids. That's a whole different story. But it is very important to find time for yourself still, regardless if you have kids or not. Whether it's a mini break, I guess that's the lesson, isn't it?
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine, probably 6 months ago. It was the beginning of this year, 8 months ago. And she's a business coach, and she talks about, she helps her clients with like burnout and stress and overwhelm and all those things, right? So we're just connecting. And I was kind of telling her like, yeah, I love my job. It's great. I'm making an impact. Everything. It's good. I don't have no complaints, but I'm still just feeling kind of burnt out. Like I'm doing too much. I need a break, but I can't, I can't do it. Blah, blah. And she gave me this idea of like resting while you work. Now, she wasn't saying, slack off while you're working, like you're doing your work, but when you're done with work, and this isn't about, it's kind of a balance thing, but it's more like, what extra things are you doing that you think, that maybe they're relevant and they're interesting but they're extra, and how can you cut those out? So I did. I just started cutting out and just leaving just the few, like talks with you and like one friend who I meet, we try and connect at least once a month, like those things. But otherwise, I really just started, unsubscribing from email lists, and it hasn't, solved the issue, but it's definitely helped. So anyway, we can, if we want to, if it's relevant, we can talk more about that.
I love that. No, I love that's a big deal. I mean, it is, and it does relate to what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about social justice work and how we're feeling and what's going on. I mean, that you need to break from your feelings sometimes. I'm like, I mean, there's times when I want to watch something super silly on television, or go in my garden and just be out there all day long. Like it's either one or the other. It's like just something that's not. I had no internet the other day. It was an area-wide internet outage, and you know what? It felt really good. The whole day, no internet. And actually, my brother and I visited each other. Actually, we live in the same house when we talk. We actually talked. Imagine that. And little things like that. I mean, I was in the garden that day, and so it was just kind of nice. It was a forced kind of unplugging, but I was like, I wasn't in any hurry to get back on. By the end, I was like, this actually is pretty good, but I had to get on at some point. But it wasn't. I just wasn't. It felt good to be off.
Absolutely. I mean, you said force. It's like in the tech world, right? It's like, the phrase forcing mechanism, right? Like, something happens and it forces us to, make the change or, whatever it is. And it's like, it applies in so many instances. And I think your example is like, sometimes it's almost like a little slap in the face. Hey, James, you're online too much. So we're going to take the power out of your, the internet out of your neighborhood. It's like, oh, okay.
Great.
Right. Thank you. I didn't ask for it. I wouldn't have thought I'd ask for it, but thank you.
Thank you. Exactly. So folks, it's been a while. Some of you guys have asked. I always read my lists. And I leave it up to you to feel like, is there a common thread or threads in the list. I think of my list very carefully. One day I may publish a book. Someone asked me to publish a book on my list. So I would like a little forward. Maybe I'll have him. Maybe I'll have Jared write the forward. So we'll work on that, Jared. We'll think of something like that.
Hey, I'm down.
But yes,
I'm down.
but it's so yeah. So there's something. But here's my list this time, and we'll see. Get ready. Here we go. Sean King, D.L. Hughley, Pete Rock, Bill Maher, Bette Midler, Macy Gray, Caitlyn Jenner, Laverne Cox, RuPaul, Baller Alert, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, TikTok, Amanda Seales, Dave Chappelle, Tammy Roman, Kiki Palmer, Bad Bunny, Candace Owens, Dr. Christopher Metzler, I Love a Mama's Boy on TLC, Zendaya, Harry Styles, What Would You Do on ABC, Michael Rappaport, Mariah Carey, Lionel Richie, Angela Johnson, Hallmark Channel, GAC Channel, The Game, the rapper, Eminem, Kid Rock, Senator Al Franken, Michelle Morgan, hashtag Sprina, Jesse Ventura, Matt Gaetz, Anna Navarro, Governor DeSantis, Governor Gavin Newsom, sorry, I get stuck, Mayor Bill de Blasio, Tucker Carlson, Piers Morgan, Thomas Sewell, Clarence Thomas, Gary Vee, Bethany Frankel, Wanda Sykes, Chelsea Handler, Joe Coy, Grindr, Bumble, Hinge, Tinder, OkCupid and Growler, Bell Hooks, Cornell West, Debbie Allen, A Strange Loop, the play on Broadway, Paradise Square, the play on Broadway, Andre DeShields, Elvis Presley, Ariana DeBois, Rita Moreno, John Leguizamo, James Franco, book bannings, Herschel Walker, his son Christian Walker, W. Kamau Bell, Joe Rogan, Roe versus Wade overturned. That's our list this time. And he always asks me any thoughts, and he hears that list always.
James, I've learned. I had. This is what I wrote down. Nothing, because I've learned that as soon as I think I see something, then I don't know. I just like hearing all the names, most of which I'm familiar, but many of which I'm not. So yeah, I have no, I have nothing to add.
Yes, I love it. I give speeches I do. Because I see everybody going, oh, I see where he's going. A few of these little groupings, you go, okay, that's on purpose. I do it on purpose. And then I throw somebody in. And it's something for some other reason. But it's all related. These lists really are. And one day I'll explain them. They really are related. And I will do a little extra because we're back for the first time in months. Much of those lists, many people have been in the news over the last 6 months for one thing or another, whether it was race or something that affects race. As you noticed, I named some dating sites, gay and otherwise, that have to do with race also. And one hashtag is an interracial couple on a soap opera. But the rest, they all have something to do with some kind of racial thing or something that affects race. I can say this list. That's what it's about. So you'll recognize some of them are trans related, which also recognizes race. And some of them are medical related, which also relates to race, inequality, and race. Because the dictionary defines privilege as a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. So that's what we're talking about. Hi, Christy. Hello, Beauty for Ashes, all you guys. You guys are in for a treat for tonight. And I know you've been in the chat before. And everybody else who's watching, thank you. Privilege. It's a word we say and immediately brings up 8,000, 100 million, gazillion, bajillion responses and feelings, depending on the person or persons you're talking to. So my first question to you, Jared Karol, when I say, and those of you guys who are listening and not watching, thank you for listening. We appreciate anybody with ears and eyes, and this is great. If you don't know this, Jared Karol's white, and I'm black. It's like quite two white guys, but no, I'm white, I'm black. Even though I am 47% white in my DNA, apparently. So I am mixed race. But here's the deal. So, Jared, when people say privilege, what is privilege? I mean, I give you the definition in the dictionary, but what is privilege to you?
So,
A base definition. We'll dig
yep. There's so many rabbit holes that we can go down that, people are going to sprain their ankles stepping in these holes.
Yes.
Because they're going to be numerous and deep. And so I actually like that definition. It was pretty close to how I would think of it. Mine's actually a little bit shorter. It's an unearned competitive advantage. An unearned competitive advantage. So I'll give a little plug for the company I work for, Translator Inc. Translator.company is the site. We actually do, and my role is to facilitate sessions, learning experiences. There's a whole tech component, everything. And one of the core kind of concepts that we center on is privilege. And we actually do a virtual walk of privilege. Some people are familiar with the exercise, the old school kind of exercise walk of privilege. So I'm not going to, go into the whole, the curriculum, everything, but basically we get to this part, we say, all right, so how are we defining privilege? And we say it's an unearned competitive advantage. And here's the thing, right? Imagine me, a white guy, and I'm usually partnered with a person of color or some different identity. And in the space, in the Zoom room, right, there could be, anywhere from 20 to 100 people in a corporate environment. And you can imagine what that is like, right? So it's awesome because it really allows us to get into all kinds of discussion based on whatever the responses are of the people. And one of the responses that's pretty common is unearned. What do you mean? I worked hard for where I've gotten. Right? We've probably all heard that, right? And it's not only white folks, but it's mostly white folks. But here's the thing, whether you use the dictionary definition you shared or mine, yes, we're talking about race on this show, and that is the most prominent, but it's not just about race. So unearned competitive advantage means that you and I might be at the same place, salary, whatever comparisons we want to use, but what type of effort took each of us to get there and to sustain that equality, right? So we're talking about more privilege equals less energy. So we talk about this idea of, I think for folks who are privileged, we talk about this idea of it not being an accusation. Right. And I hope we can get into this. I think in the social justice spaces, it's unhealthily thrown around as an accusation, right? Which puts people on the defensive, and then they don't listen, and they default to their privilege to check out the conversation and keep doing what they're doing that's harming people, right? So there's that. I'm going to pause because I'm feeling myself going in all kinds of different directions,
Yes,
and I want you to rein me and us in.
Oh, yeah, don't worry. We're good. I already know this is like our fifth or sixth show. I know you, so that's good. I was going to jump in anyway right here. I was going to say stop there, and it's there. Some of the responses I hear when you bring up privilege, because he's right. We also have there's male privilege, there's geographic privileges, there's things. Okay, so these sort of things I hear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So these sort of things I hear. I didn't own slaves. There are all kinds of slaves in the world. If you push privilege, then you're playing victim. Another thing I hear is, but I'm not rich. I didn't grow up rich. I grew up in a poor neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that I always hear when you first mention you have privilege. And I think the first concept always is, the response is related to wealth. Monetarily, it seems like that seems most people go there first. Like, but no, I was in a poor neighborhood like you were. I was poor white, and you're poor black. And you still try to go, well, still, there's like, people have that hard concept. Before you get to another thing too, I was telling some people the other day, another chat I was having, the oppressed can become oppressors to others. So in the gay community, or excuse me, the LGBTQIA plus community, the white members of the queer community still dictate to people of color in that community what the norm is. So there's all kinds of like there, but we're all gay, right? We're all gay. What are you talking about? We're all gay. I mean, so are all lesbian, or we're all bi, or all that. Like there's this whole thing of people automatically going like, but no, we are the same because I grew up on the wrong side of tracks like you did. So that's why I want to start there, kind of like this. They don't understand that there's still inequality, I guess. I mean, that's always a problem, right?
Well, I think, you know what I loved about all your examples, the you know, well, actually they're not hypothetical, the
Right.
things that people say and the circumstances that you describe, what they all have in common, or what the response or the kind of the excuse, if you will, they are all defensive, right? So it's a defensive reaction to the concept of privilege, which goes back to this idea. So, okay, well, why are people defensive? And there are all kinds of, you know, subtle reasons and nuanced and contextual reasons, but generally it's because they feel that they're being accused of having privilege, right? And so but the nuances that you bring into the conversation are so relevant for many reasons. One, the concept of intersectionality, which I'm sure if we haven't talked about, we should, right? And probably most of your listeners are familiar with that, right? So that there are multiple privileges at play depending on so many factors for each of us, right? And so there's that idea. And this concept, not only of it being people thinking of it as an accusation and actually using it as an accusation. Well, you're privileged, Jared, and you need to understand that, right? So there's that. But then also like it being a label. So the way I like to think of it, and the way we talk about it, you know, when I'm facilitating sessions, is privilege exists. And so when we go back to whether it's your dictionary definition or, you know, our simplified, you know, an unearned competitive advantage, that has nothing to do with hard work. My default position, until proven otherwise, is that everyone works hard. I know that's not true. I know there are lazy people in it, but let's just assume that everyone works hard. Okay, well, if that's true, then how come there's so much inequality? How come everyone isn't, you know, equal economically, you know, et cetera? And so really having this discussion is what's important for people who are triggered by the concept of privilege. And that's why, you know, it's easy to weaponize the concept when we're talking about this for, you know, people like me and you who do this work, you know, whether we're social justice people or whatever, you know, to throw it around and like, oh, you have privilege, you don't even realize it. Because we have to separate the fact that, yes, privilege and people who have privilege, and especially if they're not aware of it, they have been, are, and will continue to do harm because of their lack of awareness of their privilege. So we can't deny that and not address it. But at the same time, we have to find ways to talk about it where we can transcend that and change that. Or else if someone just goes, you know what, I'm not listening to you, well, then we haven't made any inroads into doing something about the privilege.
Yeah, I have a question for you on that, but I want to bring something up that's interesting.
Please.
My friend, Dr. James Simmons, who's biracial,
Yep.
Black, great guy. He went on a show the other day and talked about how he works at a hospital. I'm not going to name the hospital, just because I want to, whatever. But here in Los Angeles, in a certain neighborhood that's mostly all Black and of color, and how they don't have the same resources as the hospital is 10 minutes away in the nicer neighborhood. And it's like, people don't want to believe him when he tells us, well, no, come to I'll show you the supplies we're short of. And let's go to the other hospital, I'll show you the abundance they have.
Yep.
So if there's no privilege out there, if they're just hospitals, then why should just all the hospitals have just about the equal amount of stuff. It's like there's this monkeypox going around, of course, and COVID, and trying to get these vaccines out, and somehow this hospital is getting more vaccines than this one, and literally they're 10 miles away from each other.
Yeah.
And so when you say that, I say that's the whole point. It's like, it's this, people just don't want to look at it and go, well, that's why, like you said, if everybody's equal, everybody's truly equal, and yes, we're all working. You're right, everybody's working hard, but there's something wrong still because we're not all the same spot.
Yeah. Well, this goes back, and I'm going to keep coming back to this. Let's use your hospital. Let's say I don't work in a hospital. I don't think you work in a hospital like my wife does. So
I used to be a nurse, so I know how.
Okay, but most of us don't work in hospitals. We work somewhere else, right? So if I or you or anyone brings up this point and says, "Hey, Jared, let's look at these two hospitals and the allocation of resources and accessibility of opportunities, blah blah blah, and they're unequal, so that's privilege." This is where the psychology is interesting. Why would I, who I don't work in a hospital, I don't live in LA, why would I feel that that's why is it that that's hard for me to accept as a white person? Because something in me knows that what you point out is true, even before you illustrated it. Because my brain goes, yeah, that's true. Like Beverly Hills, Watts, yeah, there's some, right? Or whatever the discrepancy.
Yeah.
And so instead of going like, yeah, that sucks, and we should be thinking about how we can change that. The reaction with people who know subliminally or subconsciously or something, feel like there's like this sense of guilt. So accusation or guilt that is difficult for people to get over, to actually be part of the conversation. And I think that's a big element of the challenge. That's not the only challenge, of course, but if we want more people to realize that there's what privilege is and how it affects people and communities, we have to be able to have the conversation so that they can accelerate their fluency around it and then actually do something about it in their sphere, their spheres of impact.
Well, I think part of why I don't understand why people don't get it, I understand why people don't want to get it, but I understand is in cities like Los Angeles and New York and Chicago and the Bay Area
and Oakland, yes.
And I was getting it. I'm getting it. I actually live up there too, so I'm getting it. I was like, I'm saying that the point of where a few blocks over another community starts. Like I understand if folks are like in rural or towns and cities are completely 5-10 miles away from each other, and you rarely go over there. But like I'm talking about the areas in big cities where metropolitan. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying for metropolitan cities where literally it's sometimes even less. It's less than 2 miles. You're in a whole new. You just cross. I was in San Francisco. I was like, this is always kind of funny. Back in the day, one of the places I lived was I can say where I live now because I don't live anymore, was Hyde and Post, which was literally between Nob Hill, which is the nice part of downtown, and Tenderloin, which is the nice part of downtown.
The Tender Knob.
We always call it Tender Knob. We just call it Tender Knob.
My dad used to live on Pine and Jones.
Then you know exactly what I'm talking about.
That's more knob than tender, but still kind of.
But you get what I'm saying is that if the prosecutors didn't come up the hill, there's a reason. Them hills were very steep or sturdy. But the whole point is that was our whole thing was that I go down to Geary, and literally it's like Ho Central down there.
Yeah.
Shooting up and everything. I go up to Bush or Pine or because
California, yeah.
California got a little nicer. Bell Market was over there. It was a nicer market than the market I went down on, on Leavenworth and Leavenworth, went down there in O'Farrell. Like it's just like literally we're living next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm saying. It's funny when the blind eye happens. That's when it's so weird to me. That it's like, no, what are you talking about? It's all the same. We're equal. I don't know what they're talking about. What's going on? But it's like we actually live. We're bumper to bumper with each other. I understand the rural areas, but right. The cities. That's always throws me off.
Well, there's so many angles, James. Like, let's take. And I don't know if everyone on the call is as intimately familiar with the subtlety of the neighborhoods of San Francisco, but I think the Tender Knob is a perfect example. And wherever you live, there are versions of that, right? Where these neighborhoods
completely,
maybe not as stark as that example, but right.
Well,
And
I think there are. No, in New York, I know there are.
yeah, any big city, right?
Too.
Yeah,
yes.
any big city.
Yes.
And so, what is it that prevents people from, like we're having this conversation where we can talk about it without feeling defensive, dismissive, trivializing it, right? And so that's what I'm interested in, like the kind of both the EQ, the emotional intelligence of it, and like the self-awareness of it. So if I live on Pine and Jones, right, in a nice apartment, and then you live on, what'd you say, Post and Hyde,
Post
right?
and Hyde.
So and then hey, and we're friends, and like, let's meet. Well, where are we going to meet? Like, am I comfortable coming down into the Tenderloin, or am I going to say, hey James, come up the hill, we'll meet at the top of the Mark, right? And maybe you do, and maybe that's fine, like but like there's privilege in avoiding things that you can afford to avoid. And so I think it's an awareness thing. Yeah, do people in Nob Hill know that the Tenderloin's right next to them? Probably. Do they know, that it's I don't know, like drug use and prostitution is quote unquote bad? Yeah, but to not have to think about it on any real level, if you don't want to, that's privilege.
So there you go. That's a good example. Yes. Well, I can step over the dead hooker and get back to my apartment. That's someone else's problem. That's not she became a hooker and she's killed for it. That's her business. I go back to my apartment where I have air conditioning and laundry service and all that stuff.
Yeah. And
I've heard that. Actually, I've heard that also.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and this might be controversial, but it's I was about to say there's nothing wrong with that. There's actually a lot wrong with that. But there's, I think, whether it's socioeconomic or race, the things that either, like, we can't change. I can't change my whiteness. I guess you can change your socioeconomic, but things like, that you've arrived at in a certain space, that it's not like, oh, you have more money than, the hooker on Geary Street. So, you need to donate, 50% of your income to her, or to, like, that's not what we're saying. We're saying, be aware of the differences. And with that awareness, as you continue to navigate the world in all its manifestations, bring that awareness with you so that you are more empathetic, more influential in whatever, like, it all permeates out from there, whether it's how you vote, or who you don't donate money to, or how you talk with your friends, or there are all these ways that it manifests. So it really does come back to, like, this awareness, because that's how things change, right? Where more people are aware of what's going on, and they're driven to act, to make changes in whatever ways they do that. So I think that's what, well, maybe let me rephrase it. That's how it should be.
Right. I'm saying, then I have my other people who, especially in San Francisco, where you think everything is social justice, as it used to be, as we joke, as it used to was, as we used to say, and Berkeley and East Bay and all that, was really, I mean, there's a lot of history, and I'll tell you this, this, a lot of history in social justice work, a lot of history in activism, a lot of history, that I respect. I knew people who were part of it. Here in LA, it's Leimert Park, where I live down here. A lot of history in Leimert Park and parts of Baldwin Hills. It became the Black, Beverly Hills down here. Before that, there's a lot of social justice and activism, Blacks and whites come together to speak out on injustice, saying, like I said, it's changed. I feel like there's some people do. My friend Seneca Scott's out there trying to become mayor of Oakland. He's doing this little thing. I see there's some seeds, but when I was living there were a lot of, well, I worked hard, but back to that again, I worked hard to live on, 820 Bush Street. Or it's 1020 Bush Street. I was 891 Post. It was 1020 Bush Street. I worked hard to get here, And it's not my fault that I'm here, and I should, like you said, I shouldn't feel bad that I'm here. And you're like, that's not the point.
Yeah. I mean, my dad lived at 1096 Pine, so
there you go.
yeah,
Yes, it is.
right.
It is. Yes, it
I mean,
is.
every time I come into the city and I drive Pine, like to go out to wherever, I'm like,
Yes.
that's where my dad used to live when I was in high school and college and stuff. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like, okay, great. Like, no one's saying don't go to college, get a degree, get educated, get a good job, make money, have a nice lifestyle. It's just yes, all that, and that is privilege. Not accusing you of anything, not making you feel guilty. Just that's the thing. Privilege is, and so the point around unearned competitive advantage means not everyone has access to those opportunities for reasons beyond their control.
Yes.
Now, yes, are we all individuals and we make choices? Yeah, of course. But I think there's an over when you have privilege, it's easy to go, well, look at the choices you made.
A lot of judgment.
Right? And look at the choices I made. I made good choices, so I have success. You made bad choices, so it kind of sucks for you. Right? And anyone who knows anything about these dynamics knows that that's not true. Right? And so what do we have? What do we all have access to? So I grew up poor too, but I also, my dad, even though my parents were divorced, he was educated. He had a little bit of money. He pushed me to go to college. Where my mom's like, yeah, if you do, great. If not, so I had some privilege and I had some not privilege. So it's not like a blanket, like privilege, no privilege. Everything's contextual and applicable in different contexts and circumstances and communities and all these things matter.
I'm gonna get into delivery later. I want to save that for a little later because you said some stuff I wrote notes on. So okay. There's also this movement happening I've seen. It's not anything new, but I've seen a lot of it recently. Some names I mentioned in the list, like a Candace Owens and Thomas Sewell, these people who are Black and who sound like white folks to me. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. To me, I'm like, were you whitewashed? I don't know what's going on. But they have the other side of this which to me there's no other side, but they're trying to get another side that we are victimhooding ourselves when you mention privilege. There's this whole thing of, well, no, we're all the same. And I agree with white folks, we're all the same. What's wrong with you? I didn't come from slaves. I'm one of those Black folks that, magically didn't come from slaves, whatever. And I've had some opportunities as everybody else, went to the same schools, and everything else, and I got what I've got. But when you say you can't get there, you're basically placing yourself as a victim. So what are some of your thoughts on that there's that movement happening a lot right now. So there's that hinders the privilege talk, I think.
I mean, I have some thoughts and I just want to preface because it's obviously very, very relevant in a meta way to this conversation that anything I share, I'm a white person. So anything that comes across as criticism of Black folks or any commentary on what
I'm inviting him to comment
on what. But I think there's this, and I think a lot of people would argue, and I think they have a point that, someone like Barack Obama would represent this kind of respectability politics, right? Which, W.B. Du Bois and others, have talked about, the talented 10th and all this thing. And again, being a white person, I can only comment so far in it, but I know from, reading and learning and listening and my history and friends and stuff, this idea of even the word professional, right? So, who has deemed dreadlocks or an afro or hair extensions to be unprofessional? White people. Because they don't, for the most part, wear dreadlocks and have an afro. Now, some do, and some have, and some would even go to
We've
work,
talked about this on the show for a little bit of the hair stuff.
So that's an example of privilege. Who gets to make the decision and the policies and the processes and the laws, right? So to answer your question around, I think I work with some folks like this where they're Black professionals who are successful and respected and doing good work, who've kind of arrived or made it, which is great, awesome, and recognizing that they did have to fight the odds to get there, almost like this forgetting that for every Oprah or for every LeBron James or for every Steph Curry or any other Barack Obama, like how many people haven't gotten anywhere near that and never will, not because they're not smart, hardworking. So I think there's this like amnesia perhaps, and this almost like I don't even know how to describe it, James, like this kind of like assimilation almost.
See, that's where I'm going with that. I'll say it. I'm Black. I'll say it. Yeah. I think there's a lot of assimilation happening. I come from a mixed race family who would tell me things they would do to pass, things they would do to get ahead, with no shame, and had no shame about it. And it was like, I gotta do this to get ahead. And I learned how not to judge them so heavily, especially when it was back in the day a little bit. I see where they were coming from. I'm not saying I personally do it myself. I have no idea. But it was interesting that because they have privilege too. A lighter skinned Black person has privilege over people who are darker.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that into the conversation. And by the way, and I think this, but people who maybe aren't familiar with me, anything I say around some of these, I do not believe in like reverse racism or any of that kind of nonsense. So I just want to make that clear up front.
Yeah.
But anyone can have privilege in any given context. So in general, do I, as a straight white man, have more privilege than you as a gay Black man? Yeah. But if I were to come down and hang out in a gay bar in LA with you, I don't know if you go to gay bars or not, but right, in that little world, I would have less privilege.
Yes.
Now, what I want to make clear though is like, and I could easily choose not to go that, because why would I do that?
Yeah,
right. So, I mean, I remember talking to someone, oh gosh, this was a long time ago. I can't even remember the conversation, but it was this idea of like, well, I don't feel comfortable going into, what Hunter's Point. It's like, okay, that's fair. As a white person, maybe you don't feel comfortable going into Hunter's Point but do you need to go into Hunter's Point?
Right, exactly.
Do you is there a grocery store or a something that you have to, go into Hunter's Point to get? No. You could spend your whole life and never once go into Hunter's Point and get everything you need. But if I live in Hunter's Point, I have to come out of Hunter's Point to get things, to do things.
This person in the chat room was agreeing with you, yeah, and you can leave when you want.
Yeah.
You can come and go. Yeah, you can go as you please.
So I think, back to the Black people who I can think of just two off the top of my head, probably more if I had more time, but people I know, very successful Black people who are the equivalent of like VP of diversity at a company, which is great. And they're smart and they're good. But I think sometimes their corporate VP-ness trumps, and I use that.
I know. I used to work out too. I know.
Right. It trumps their Blackness.
Yeah.
So when they're making decisions, when they're, working with their teams and doing trainings or policies or shaping, hey, okay, you're Black and you're VP, and it sucks because you're the only VP, person of color at the VP level, but you're still making $300K and you're not really risking as much as you could because you'd probably get fired, which you don't want to do. So you have this comfy kind of corporate job. So it's like both. It's privilege and marginalization, like at the same time.
Yes, marginalization, that happens too. Yes, that kind of sometimes does go hand in hand, especially in the corporate world. I just got neutered from a corporate job client that I was working with, and I'm deciding what I want to do. What the work I was doing social justice work through them, and I got neutered. So I'm going to be dealing with that actually. I'll talk about it more in maybe in a future show. I'm still in the middle of it. So I'm still trying to work through the feelings and everything, but I just had happened to me. And again, by a person who's white, who's is the new CEO of this company. And the other person was much more like, James, we're believing you, do what you want, we love it. This person's a little different, which is their right to be different, obviously. We're right to be different, CEO. But it's one of those things, again, if we're all, I just love what you said earlier, if we're also, we're all working hard, we're all doing good work, then why is there more equality? And that's what it is. And I said, my example, my other friend, James, the doctor, I just like, those are examples of things are uneven. And it's okay to acknowledge that they're uneven. So my question to you, Jared, is we still are just having this problem of acknowledgement.
Yep.
Now, but you also mentioned delivery.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, this is my own, just from seeing we're going to hell in a handbasket, everybody. So everybody hold on for your lives. This is crazy out there. But I really have a hard time believing that even delivery can help us now. Because I'm seeing some of the folks that I mentioned this list, like a Ben Shapiro and a Matt Walsh, and even Bill Maher these days. I don't know what the fuck is happening with him. I used to be a fan of his, not anymore. They have turned these people where they're actually talking very calmly and try to sound very smart as they're literally insulting you at the same time. And it's like, I'm listening to these people going, I see why two folks of privilege hear it and it sounds good to me. I don't know why do people who think this, and then but us, the rest of us are going, there's still something wrong, because the delivery, because I agree with you, don't should be preachy and that kind of, I'm tired of that too on any side, and both sides are preachy about a lot of stuff these days. It's like, there's one cut out, but the delivery has been changing a bit. And I think nowadays, I don't even think delivery is going to help us. I don't know. I mean, I have no hope.
Well, so I'm glad you're bringing this back up, and maybe delivery isn't the most precise word, because what I want to make very clear again also is I'm not talking about tone policing.
Right, yeah, right.
Oh, James, could you just say that a little nicer? Because I just don't like being talked to like that when
we'll
you're
try that, of course. Yeah, all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about that. Yeah, I guess what I'm talking about is, and maybe I'm overweighting like my, people who do like my kind of work, who are facilitating, who are doing trainings, who are in, positions where, right, is having both the urgency and the delivery of like, hey, this is something that's serious that we need to talk about, and that our lack of acknowledgement and awareness of it is causing harm. While at the same time, when I say delivery, and I'm going to hold some space for us to talk about it. What do you think? Oh, tell me why you're triggered by that. Now, I have privilege to be able to do that, but I see it as a responsibility, right? Because if I go, you dipshit, you don't understand your privilege. You're just making it worse. Well, then if I already don't understand it, and now I've just been scolded for not understanding it, I'm not going to all of a sudden understand it, let alone change. Right. So when I say delivery, maybe delivery isn't the right word, but like the way we set the way we talk about it, the people who do, whether we have or whatever degree or level or circumstance of privilege we have, the people who have fluency, like you, like me, and like a lot of people who have fluency around this, have to be willing to lead these discussions in a way, and not to be professional or to be nice or to be, kind, but so that we can actually make inroads and make change.
But the thing is, when you say delivery, though, I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and I feel like back in the day, delivery did matter a lot more. I feel like it did. So I know what you're saying. So when you say delivery, I totally get what you're saying, because again, no one wants to be talked at. So I get that point. But I'm saying nowadays, I think people are just like, I don't know if you try to talk nice to them. Are you talking? I just think people just their minds are shut off.
Well, I don't think it's about niceness. I think it's about, what are we actually trying to do? why are we talking about this on this show, in my work, in your work, in companies, in hospitals, and why are we talking about this? Because we want there to be change. We want there to be more equity, health equity, socioeconomic opportunity, all the things, right? That's why we do this work, social justice work, or whatever the umbrella is, right? So I know for me, and I see this a lot, I was in the bomb throwing stage of my revolution for many years, right? Many years of like,
Yeah.
And then what happens? Okay, so you blow up a conversation, but did anyone actually listen to you? Did anyone actually change or were inspired to change? Probably not. So it's this idea, and this is kind of a Buddhist concept, right? This idea of like being invested in, but not attached to outcomes.
Yeah.
So the outcome that I'm invested in is change, is people realizing that what privilege is, how it shows up, bringing self-awareness and group and community, corporate, whatever your space is, awareness, and then using that to make changes. That's what I'm invested in. Am I going to be able to do that? Are you going to be able to do that? Every time? No, fuck no. So it's like, how do we show up with integrity and purpose and intentionality and fluency, but know that, some people are still, no matter how, if we bomb throw or if we hold their hand or anything in between, they're going to say, I don't believe in privilege. Like they're just not. And so we have to accept it, not because it's like, it's okay, but because it just is. And so I think that's a key part. When I talk about delivery, maybe like approach is kind of the better word to capture what I'm trying to say. What's our approach, and how there's a great friend of mine. She was actually one of the first people to push me to write a book. Her name's Dr. Nika White. She's a Black woman. She's out of South Carolina. She's a DEI consultant. And, she gets this very well. She's like, hey, I'm a Black woman. She has like a 20-year-old Black son in the South. She worries about him every time. So she gets it. She's not sugarcoating anything. She's not ignorant. She's not doing respectability, none of that stuff.
Yes.
And she understands, as a, whatever you want to call her, consultant, educator, trainer, speaker, whatever she does, that if she wants things to change for her son, for her, for everyone, there has to be an approach that people are going to listen to.
Yeah, it's very interesting because one of the people in chat, Nikisha says, the DI pendulum is swinging the other way now. Not as popular to be inclusive.
Wait, what was that?
One of the people in the chat room, Nikisha, said the DEI pendulum is swinging the other way now. Not as popular to be inclusive.
Yeah, it is.
She's a Black woman. So there's all that. So that's very interesting. So that's it's well. There's also this isn't new. What comes along with privilege, privilege is accessibility, which we were talking about. And you're welcome. I said, thanks for having this conversation. You're welcome. We used to have these long time, Nikisha, we're bringing him back. He's my go-to person. It was, accessibility, where there's a whole thing about, of course, affirmative action. And nowadays, not so much affirmative action as an actual program. Just now, they use it as a catch-all phrase for any kind of diversity hires, they call them. I put in quotes, diversity hires, all that kind of stuff. So because white folks, not me saying this is not me making anything up, there's a group of white folks who believe they're being erased.
Yep.
Oh, Nikisha says, I facilitate DI in Virginia. Our DI is political.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Social justice, DEI, and whatever acronym people use, they're all over the place, right?
Right.
It isn't inherently political, or it shouldn't be, but it'd be naive to think that it doesn't have political implications, or that it shouldn't have political implications. But to Lakeisha's point, right? DeSantis privilege to make laws that you know don't say gay. And that's just something, you know, my friend and I at dinner were talking about DeSantis, so it's fresh in my mind, right? Like, so, you know, book banning, you know, if we can't make white kids feel uncomfortable talking about race, like that's all coming from privilege, which comes from this feeling of being accused, and now we're the victims, and so it's, you know, that's why we have to keep doing the work. So am I ever gonna, if I had a chance to sit down one-on-one with, you know, Ron DeSantis, am I gonna convince him or persuade him? Probably not.
No.
If I'm bomb throwing or if I'm having a civil conversation or anywhere in between, I'm probably not. Right. But because there are people like him, and he's just a high profile, easy example. I'm not trying to, you know, but because there are so many people, whether they're in political power like that or otherwise, who have these feelings, white people are being erased, you know, we can't make white kids feel uncomfortable, you know, all these things that we know are bullshit and are harmful, because that way of thinking exists and is always going to exist. That's why we all have to keep doing the work. Not to win or you know, it can't, you know, like in these conversations we always say it's not black and white or right or wrong or yes or no. Right. So it's always, you know, it's a continuum, it's a spectrum, it's a yes and. I think the same thing, sometimes we get caught in this, like, well, we have to get rid of that thinking, you know, 100%. Like, really? You think that's going to happen? You think somehow in a year or 5 years or 10 years, like, you know, there's going to be no one left who doesn't think critical race theory is harmful, who doesn't, you know, like, that's just absurd. That's naive. And so I think we have to, you know, have that balance of invested in but not attached to outcomes.
Well, I feel like there are, in my opinion, I feel that in my opinion, that a lot of issues that are coming up are man-made, or I would say man-made, are made up, so to speak. Drag queens in schools. I don't know very many drag queens going to elementary schools. I just don't really know any. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are drag queens. They don't get asked to go to elementary school. I don't know many teachers who are talking about their personal life with preschool and kindergartners. I really don't see that very often either. Usually they're busy trying to take care of the kids. There's a lot going on. Even though many of the kids come from same-sex parent homes, story. But I'm just saying, I'm finding some of these things, and some of these books are being banned, or like,
yep.
It's very interesting, the books they're choosing. And I have to chuckle sometimes because some of this stuff is just like, it's not really a problem. It's not really a problem. Not really. But they're making it so huge. The kids. It's all about the kids right now. That's what's happening with this whole privilege thing. It's all about and I'm saying the white kids. It's not about the regular, it's about the white kids.
It's the white kids. Well, so these are good examples. The book banning at the school level, right? The, you know, we could even talk about the overturn of Roe v. Wade. That's very relevant in this conversation too. That DeSantis with the don't say gay, all the anti-transgender, you know, all the things, right? We know, meaning me, you, if I'm a trans person, if I'm, you know, if I have one or more of these identities, or if I don't, but I'm sympathetic to them, we know that's a bunch of bullshit. And a lot of other people do. So again, it's not about changing Ron DeSantis's mind so he passes more, you know, equitable laws. It's about continuing to have these conversations and making that vast swath of people who aren't like, kind of hear this kind of stuff and going like, I don't know, but don't really have a strong opinion. It's educating those folks so they do actually have a strong opinion with us, so that so you can vote, so you can change laws, so you can protest at schools, so you can, you know, whatever it is. So I think, again, it's not getting, you know, everyone, it's getting the people who kind of are in the middle, who will be receptive to a new opinion. Oh my gosh, James, until you said that, I never thought of that. Thank you so much. That gives me a whole new perspective. I'm going to go out and blah, blah, blah. Now, can we control that? Are we going to go micromanage them for the next 6 weeks and make sure they do their homework and follow through? Like, no. So there has to be some level of trust that people are going to change. And I'll speak for myself. My version is I trust that what I'm sharing in all my, even including right now, in all my different spheres of impact and spheres of influence, some percentage of people are going to be given a new perspective and they're going to go out and do something with that. I don't always know what that is or how many people, but I'm going to trust in the integrity of my intentionality.
It's in a chat room now. They're talking about DeSantis now all of a sudden. He's a whiny baby. Oh my God, he can become president. They're all talking in the chat room. That's a true possibility, Jeremy. It's very true.
Like Trump or DeSantis, like which
I know. We had a drag queen school fundraiser here in Lynchburg, Virginia, Falwell County, country, huge scandal. Well, you're one of the none I've never heard of. So I'm saying in LA, we haven't had any. And we have 1 million children in LA, 1 million schools. I'm saying it's not a national problem. I don't think it's a problem that we should start worrying about all RuPaul's drag race will soon at elementary schools. I don't think it's going to happen. I feel like they're using children, it's just this excuse. Because again, I started laughing going, so when we were talking about slavery, I'm talking about indigenous peoples being killed and murdered, all this kind of stuff, when we were kids, it's okay for us to hear that, but you can't let the white kid hear that their ancestors did it. That's just part of, there must be, if they're good teachers, there must be a way to teach you, this is history. We're not trying to say that your parents did it, or that you did, just like, this is history. Like you said, all around the world, there's all kinds of history that's not the greatest. But somehow in America, there's other countries too that have problems, but in America, we have a problem discussing it realistically.
Yeah. Well, so you brought up this idea of, that concept of, hey, okay, we have these classrooms of kids of all races. Well, in some cases, right? So it's okay to traumatize or re-traumatize the Black kids and talk about how slavery was, but it's not okay to, traumatize the white kids and it's, so it's kind of, it's when you put it that way, it's ridiculous, right?
It is
it's ridiculous anyway, but that's just it.
Yeah.
But so another thing, like this idea of comfort. So this idea of comfort zones. So when we're talking about what makes people feel uncomfortable about any of this, anything, right? About racial stuff, economic stuff, gender stuff, whatever, right? And you have basically 3 levels of concern. You have 3 degrees of comfort, if you will, of concern. Level 1, I just don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to come across as insensitive. I don't really know a lot about that topic. So I'm just going to kind of like keep my mouth shut and, not really get involved. Right? Level 2 is, I don't really feel like I belong here. I'm the only fill in the blank. And yeah, I guess people are nice to me, but they don't really include me. It's kind of weird and I'm sick of it. Level 3 is, I don't feel safe. I could get hurt in this space, right? So if you think about like these degrees of concern around comfort level, like those are generally, I don't want to look stupid. I don't feel like I belong is 2. Level 3 is, I need to get out of here, or else I'm gonna get hurt. The problem is that the level 1 folks, white folks, men, straight folks, etc., right? Let their level 1 concern equate or oftentimes trump someone else's level 3 concern. Right? And that's privilege. To say, yeah, it's just kind of a sensitive topic, so I don't really want to talk about it. Oh, you feel like if you stay in this room for another 10 minutes, you might get stabbed? They're the same thing, though. Mine's more important. So I think that's what we're talking about. And how do we get people to accelerate their fluency around those dynamics, whatever they are in whatever context, whether it's work, community, on the streets, whatever it is.
In chat room, it's hard to learn while you're being triggered. Someone wrote.
It is.
It is. It is. No, but it is. Okay, so I got something to say.
Yeah, please.
I got things to say.
It is your show, James. You can say
I got things to say, people. That's what I say. I already told the story before on a previous show. I'm just going to just briefly just bring it up to make a point that I want to make. And that is when I was in Cleveland, the whole Wahoo Indian thing was going on, which is the mascot for the Cleveland Indians baseball. And I was surrounded by Clevelanders of all colors going, no, it pays homage to them. You're not from Cleveland, so you don't understand. All those kind of words. And I thought, but the Indians who live here are like, they're offended by it. They have bucktooth and red skin with feathers. I mean, like, that's how they look. I mean, it's like, but it was that whole thing of, and why I say that story briefly again is because the larger piece of this is, if you've never had to think about it, especially if you grew up in homogenized areas where it's all the same, that look like you on some level. That can be all black, all white, whatever, do anything about it, all straight, whatever it is. You know, when something that comes in, this is not like the other, like that song, comes in, and one thing is like the other, comes in, it's an intrusion of sorts. It's a bothersome problem. It's like, well, we're doing just fine here in Mayberry. What the fuck are you doing? Why are you trying to burst my bubble of, you know, Andy Fife and everybody? What's going on?
Yeah.
I feel like that is one thing, and I will give, and like my privilege, I will give. No, I will actually accept that being a hurdle for some people because it's never. I think everybody in the family is right-handed. I came along left-handed. That changed everything. They couldn't teach me how to tie my shoes. They couldn't all these things they couldn't teach me to do. I learned my own. Then my brother came 3 years later. He was left-handed. They threw me on him. They didn't deal with it. They just said, you deal with it. You're left-handed. That's a microcosm of kind of how I feel like the world works. It's like, well, you're black and you're black. Well, you guys can talk about over there. I mean, leave us alone. Everything's fine. I feel like that happens. So I guess my question to you is, Mr. Karol, how can you talk about race or even sexual equality when everyone's trying to get their piece of the pie and things have been status quo for so long for them? It may be a rhetorical question. I don't even know. I mean, I just feel like, because everybody's trying to grab at right, especially right now. Everybody's trying to grab, I'm straight male black, I'm straight male white, I'm a female. What does female mean? I'm a biological female, but no, I'm trans, I'm this over here. But I'm bisexual. You guys don't like the bisexuals, and the gays don't like us, and the straights don't like us, but we exist. And then they get the gay guys going, well, what about the black gay guys over here going, you had it hard? I'm like, oh, well, what do you think I'm doing? Like, I feel like everyone, you know, and I'm fat. So, I mean, fat people have their own things too, but no, I'm skinny or I'm old. There's ageism. There's like, I'm an old, well, you're old, James. You don't look like I'm 53 years old. Folks say I don't look 53. I take that as a compliment, whatever that means. But I have folks who would say that's actually privilege because black don't crack or Asian don't raisin or all those sayings they say. They say, I'm an old white person. You have better looks than I do, James. It's easier for you because you have the better skin, so to speak. Like, that's privilege of some sort. Like, everybody's trying to grab, that's where I'm kind of at this point. It's like, I feel like everybody's trying to grab their piece, and the ones who have privilege are usually feel like they're being erased or attacked or minimized. And I'm like, so how do we get them to even listen to the talks of privilege?
Well, this is awesome. I mean,
I'm like, hey, good night, everybody. I'm done. Bye.
I mean, I wrote down so many things because it sparked so many things. So I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
But I will come back with, again, like the approach, vulnerability. So whether I'm doing an official session and, you know, with for work with the clients, or I'm speaking, or even now, I try to be vulnerable and share personal stuff about me. You know, in the book, very vulnerable about, you know, how I came to do this work through my dad being a gay man, dying of AIDS, my ignorance, my privilege, right? And then changing. Right. So storytelling, sharing stories, and really you kind of, and this is always tricky, and I know it's kind of triggering or contentious for some people. You mentioned like we have to accept that even though we know that it's nowhere near as serious to feel uncomfortable talking about race as it is to actually be the victim of racism.
Yes.
Right. So we know that.
Yes.
But the person who is feeling uncomfortable talking about race, that is, as you said a little bit ago, that is a hurdle. So we're not holding their hands or coddling them by saying, oh, it's so hard for you to talk about race. I get it. Why don't you just step away? No, we're saying, hey, I get it. It was hard for me 25 years ago too, and I've worked on it to change. So I'm challenging you and I'm supporting you. So we have to find ways to do that, because otherwise it's just going to continue the polarization, the divisiveness, the making people wrong. Brene Brown, who I know is contentious in some of these race circles.
I like her though.
I do too. I think she's awesome. She says shame and humiliation are not social justice tools. They're not, period. So yes, I understand it. If I'm a Black person who's pissed off about racism my whole life, to want to get back and shame a white person for having privilege or not even being aware that they have privilege and all the things, it's not going to work. It's not going to change anything. It's not. So, if you want to accuse me of siding with white people against Black people, okay, well, that's not going to work either, because A, that's not true. And B, let's again think about what we're trying to do here. We're trying to change. So yes, I'm familiar with the concept of, relieving the burden of education and emotional burden from the people who are experiencing it. Absolutely. That's why I do this work. So if I can step in and relieve some of that burden by educating people, by sharing stories, by supporting people on their journey and helping them get over their hurdles, then I'm contributing and relieving some of that burden from someone else who doesn't have to, who doesn't have to, put out that emotional bandwidth, right? Another thing, Brian Stevenson in his what's the Just Mercy?
Yes.
Right. He talks about this idea of proximity. Right. Proximity. I think he says proximity to the issue or to the problem, which is true, but also proximity to the people. So the reason I think I am pretty effective in this space, not because I think I'm Black or because I think I'm gay, no, but I've intentionally cultivated relationships and learnings with people from different backgrounds than me. And so I'm hearing their stories, I'm believing their stories, I'm understanding, I'm making connections between, you tell me a story and I go, oh yeah, that's like what so-and-so said last week or in the book, or so I'm making all these connections, and it's very intentional. So, this proximity. And so people don't do that. They keep separated, right? And then the other thing, I just want to give a shout out to my friend, Autumn Harris. She was a colleague of mine a few years ago. Young, queer Black woman in North Carolina, which isn't always the easiest place to be a young, queer Black woman.
I'm sure.
Where we used to work, she was on a panel that I was watching. I wasn't part of the panel, and it was an in-house thing. And it was like I'm on allyship or something like that. I think it was for Pride Month. And the VP moderator said, so what can people do to the last 2 minutes? Everyone, give us an action to take away, right? One of those types of things.
Oh yeah.
She said, follow the lead of the people closest to the pain.
Ooh,
so the Cleveland Indians thing.
Yes.
If the Native Americans in Cleveland and other places are saying we don't want this, follow their lead, even if it's 3 people and they're
exactly.
So follow the lead of and this is where I have to be careful doing this work, right? Like I want to be influential and shift things and stuff, but I also have to make sure I'm not overstepping my role. So anyway, I don't know if I even answered your question, but I had to.
You did something. The thing is, there is no true answer at the moment. Things are in disarray. That's almost kind of the point of, as we come to a close. I can talk to you forever. It's been talking an hour and a half already almost. But that's kind of the point, is that we have to, if we can we find a way to talk about this in a way that people, because someone in the chat just said, well, if they're willing to listen, yes. Because when there's mandatory meetings, because the energy is different, she says.
Right. Well, even people, I would, and this is tough. And this is, again, I bring my mindfulness Buddhist kind of stuff into this work. Even if people aren't willing to listen, we need to speak and say our thing and be consistent and be constant, right? Again, it's like, I get it. I've been in-house, and I've been a consultant. I've been in all kinds of various positions where it's like, everyone, like, come to the meeting, God damn it, and we're gonna. Yeah. It's like, no, like, if you would have asked, I would have told you not to do that. Like, right. But you can't always control everything, right? No. So even in less than ideal contexts and circumstances and ways of arriving into spaces, we still need to talk and still need to say our piece and think about our approach and our goals and our intentionality. Even if we feel, and maybe even just, in our bones know that, like, no one's listening, no one's going to change, at least it's been spoken out into that space and people can't unhear it. Now, whether they do anything with it or not is another question. But
wait a minute, somebody, stop there. So I should know that name again, that person. They go, I like to use that. She goes, I'll tell you, type their name in the chat. I'd like to use that. The last name he said. Give me some names you just said.
Brian Stevenson with Just Mercy. About the proximity. Autumn Harris was my friend who said follow the lead of those closest to the pain.
Okay, so let's say Autumn.
Her name, it's Autymn is how you spell her name. Okay. Harris. And I think she's fine with me, giving her. I want to give her credit for saying that because it was so powerful. It was like a year ago.
Brian, how's his name spelled?
It's with a Y. Stevenson, I think it's as it sounds, STEV. Do I have his book nearby?
He said, the follow. She wants to know what the follow the lead the people closest.
Yeah, follow the lead of the people closest to the pain.
And that was Autumn Harris.
Right? Autumn Harris, yeah. And I don't, I need to get back in touch with her. I haven't talked to her for a long time. So
if she would want to come on our show, I would love to have her on our show. If
she might.
The three of us, if she ask her, seriously ask her. If she's open to coming on the show and talking with me, I'd love to have her.
We have to do it earlier because she's in Carolina. So
that's fine. But most of it's because of you. I'm like, I can go, I can do whatever, but it's up to you guys. Yes.
Yeah. You know what? I'll send I'll start an email thread with the three of us and just say, hey, we were having this conversation. I used your quote. Here's what we've been talking about. Are you interested in
I'll show her links to our show so you can look at our shows. Lakeisha says thank you.
You're welcome. One other thing, James, I want to share that I meant to. This idea of comparative suffering, and this is again a kind of a Brene.
We know that one. I call the pain Olympics.
Right.
That's what I call it.
Let's go back to the tender knob example, right?
Yes.
Well, so what? I worked hard and I got my nice apartment on Bush Street, and but I still, X, Y, Z, ABC things. My rent is high, or blah blah blah, whatever suffering I have. We always want to compare. Like my suffering's worse than yours, or just as bad as yours, or yours isn't as bad as his, or there. Stop. They're all true.
Right. And
not all privileges and marginalizations are equal. So if I live in a fancy apartment on Bush Street and I have for whatever reason, I have a hard time paying my rent because I'm a junior employee or whatever. Yeah, okay, I get it. It's hard to pay your rent and have a good time in the city, but that's not the same as, I can't afford to pay rent and I'm living on the streets on Turk and Jones.
Well, I always say there's your reality could be true, my reality could be true. They both could be true together.
Yeah.
And I feel like, but I call it the Pain Olympics. Everybody's trying to go for the gold.
Right.
My people went through this. No, my people went through. I have one friend that I had to tell the other day. I'm like, I can't deal with this right now because I'm bringing up something that's just painful for me, and you're already like, well, mine was worse than yours. I'm like, I'm sharing something with you. So just like say, I'm sorry you went through that, or just kind of like, that does suck, or like, fuck that bitch, whatever the word is, co-sign it. That's what co-sign what I'm saying. Not that, well, now it's my turn to bring up the worst thing that happened. I mean, it's like, because we can do this all day long. And I've been through some horrible shit. I can tell you bring up stuff that would curl your hair. You don't even have hair. That would happen. You're grown.
Maybe. Wait, could you tell me stuff that could grow my hair?
Exactly. I could. Like,
well, hey, I'll listen all day to that.
Yeah, you would listen to that one, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. But that's why it's like I feel like I hate that part, because I feel like everyone's stories, and then somebody said chime there for a minute too. It is annoying. It's like everybody's stories are like, well, we had slaves in Greece. We had slaves. Like, no, that's not the point. We all get there's no Black person has ever said, and I know of, no Black person has ever said we were the only slaves in the world. Like, I've never heard that before in my entire life. But it does come across to people like, well, no, it's so we know that there's world history versus American history. We know, but we live in America. We're dealing with American stuff. It's an American problem, in my opinion. It's an American issue for all Americans to come together and realize there's inequality. It's just there. Now, what can we each do to help break that out?
Yeah.
And kind of overcome that. Like that's why we have these talks. That's why I talk with him. That's why I read his book. I love his book. That's why I'm on the show. That's what we're talking about, because it's just like these are just little pieces to start something. And somebody in chat room loves what you wrote already. So that means they learned something, they enjoyed it. They're going to take that away. Our job is done, Jared. I mean, they love what you said there. I mean, I feel like, but you know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of thing. It's like we're doing little seeds of things here and there, and folks will watch this afterwards and listen to it afterwards and have their opinions. But I think I'm tired of this almost them versus us, me versus you. It's like it's us, and this is what's going on for me. Can you please acknowledge it? There you go. We will not cancel us.
Have I shared this on your show before?
No, you haven't.
Is like my Bible. Adrienne Marie Brown. She's a kind of a movement organizer, facilitator, etc. She talks a lot about this idea of how can we, in movement communities, social justice communities, I mean, think of how many people and small, local, regional, national, internet, there's so many people doing this work with some angle, some emphasis, some have more money and privilege and people than others, and blah, blah, blah. There's just so much. And I'm not saying every single one of them is great. I'm sure there are some that are doing harm, but yeah, for the most part, they're trying to make change in some way, in some sphere of influence. And what she's saying is there are going to be disagreements around approach, around style, around ethics, all these things. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong. That doesn't mean, like, if you say we should do it this way and I say we should do this way, that either one of us is wrong.
Right.
Like, and so this whole idea of like, we will not cancel, it's like, why don't we go, hey, James, that's really interesting that you're emphasizing points A, B, C. I'd like to hear more about how that's been effective for you. As opposed to like, really? You think doing that is going to work? You're stupid. You should be disbarred, or you should, it's like, and I'm kind of being extreme just to prove my point, but it's like we have these conversations. So even like, on the show, so someone comes on and they're listening, they're chatting and they're taking notes. If they agreed with everything that you said, or everything I said, or everything we said collectively, then we're not doing our job, right?
Right.
So, hey, pick the parts that work for you, contemplate them. Maybe the things that challenge you, go, not sure about that, but okay, right? And I think when we talk about what we can do, like, reflection is an action. That's why I subtitled the book An Invitation to Reflect and Act.
Yes.
Because it's not just go out and do something and then you're done.
Yeah.
So anyway, stepping down from my soapbox.
I like soapboxes. They're great. No, and Nikisha says that, well, the chatter was all saying thank you very much. It's after midnight where I'm at. I'm exhausted from work, but this was so engaging that I'm still up.
Well,
Jeremy,
thank you.
Same thing. No, seriously, thank you. We usually do these once a month. We've been out of practice for a while because of just life. But hopefully we're back. I'm going to try to book him again next month. We'll see what he says. But Jared, thanks for being on the show as always. Thanks for having this conversation with me.
James, thank you for inviting me and trusting me and engaging me and letting me do the same with you.
Thank you. And his book, do you have it? You have it nearby?
Of course, I keep
A
it.
White Guy Confronting Racism, Imitation a Reflected Act. Follow him everywhere at A White Guy Confronting Racism. He's everywhere at reconnectingracism.com. He's on Instagram. He's on YouTube. Everywhere. Just A White Guy Confronting Racism. He's the only one. He's the only white guy in the world confronting racism. That's it. That's crazy. I'm James Lott Jr., of course, and I don't have books on race, but I live it every day. So that's what I share my experiences with you. Patreon.com, James Lott Jr. I have 24, 25 Patreons right there. Little Lotties, we call them now, Jared. They're Lotties. Lotties are following me, and I give you all kinds of bonus content. I talk to you, and you talk to me, and we have a good time. So come in and join. I have a new member today that came today. So hi, new member. Thanks for joining. buymeacoffee.com/James Lott Jr. That's my new little venture. Someone bought me coffee today, so thank you. It's a little thing that I do. I give you a podcast of when you buy me a coffee or however you buy me, you get a free podcast called Lots and Lots of Coffee. We talk about all kinds of coffees, what they do, what they mean to us. Kirsten, you just bought me one, I think yesterday. Thank you very much for buying me one. It's like a little tip jar because I do this full time. That's what I do full time. That's how I make my money. So buymeacoffee.com, James Lott Jr. to get a free podcast while you're there. Also, we have merch now, jljmedia.threadless.com. I'm putting designs up every day. Check that out also. But everyone, please, Extra Connections on Facebook. The Race Talk, our previous episodes are here on JLJ Media or any audio streaming service platform. Say that 5 times fast. Audio streaming service platforms. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, all of them. So just type in Extra Connections Race Talk, it pops up. You'll see it. Jared and I've done, I think, I want to say 4 or 5 of these, 5 or 6 of these.
Yeah, yeah.
They're a lot of they're good folks. You should totally listen to them. They're saying thank you to us. But thank you. I do have Cash App. It's Black Hope LA BL. I'll put it in the chat room. I guess that's you, my Cash App too. It's BLAKHOPELA. Because I am the Black Hope. Great Black Hope. Anyway, he's the only white guy can racism. I'm the Great Black Hope. Now watch the comments go from there. I love you guys. Have compassion and offer grace when you can.